Behind the velvet curtains of the world's most exclusive charity galas, a silent and profound transformation has occurred. What appears to the public as an outpouring of boundless generosity is often, in reality, the most sophisticated financial shell game ever devised. As an investigative journalist, I have spent years peeling back the layers of what I call the shadow sector, exposing a reality that sharply contradicts the smiling, philanthropic faces seen on the evening news. We are living in an era where the term charity has been cleverly weaponized by a global elite, a collective of multinational CEOs, high net worth individuals, and powerful political figures who have mastered the art of turning altruism into a private bank account. This is not merely a story of a few bad actors making mistakes. It is a deep dive into the systematic misuse of private charitable foundations that now function as the ultimate slush funds for the wealthy and influential. And these individuals utilize incredibly complex legal structures to bypass the tax obligations that the average citizen is required to pay. This phenomenon is global, but its heart beats loudest in tax-friendly jurisdictions like the United States, where the 501 tax code has been stretched to its breaking point. From the gleaming towers of Manhattan to the secretive offshore financial centers of the Caribbean, billions are being funneled into private vessels. Over the last 2 decades, we have seen an exponential and alarming growth in private foundations and donor-advised funds, commonly known as DAFs. And the reason for this explosion is simple yet calculated. These structures allow the elite to maintain their high social prestige and public influence, while simultaneously shielding their massive fortunes from taxation and any meaningful public oversight. To truly understand the gravity of this shift, we must look at the evolution of philanthropy itself. A century ago, the gospel of wealth championed by industry titans like Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller established a specific paradigm. They believed that the wealthy had a moral obligation to distribute their riches for the public good, resulting in thousands of libraries, schools, and hospitals that we still use today. However, that era of grand, visible giving has been replaced by the modern charity industrial complex. Today, and the legal loophole is the primary driver of philanthropic activity. The tax code is meticulously designed to incentivize the creation of foundations as a strategy to reduce estate and income taxes to near zero levels. This has created a fundamental divide in the nonprofit world. On one hand, you have public charities that rely on grassroots support and are subject to high levels of scrutiny. On the other, you have the rise of the private foundation, a legal entity controlled entirely by a single family or corporation, serving as a fortress for their capital. This lack of transparency is the foundation of the slush fund. While the public sees a massive headline about a billionaire donating a fraction of their net worth, the small to medium foundations operate in almost total financial opacity. And as we are currently navigating an economic environment where low interest rates and extreme wealth concentration have created a massive surplus of capital that the elite desperately need to shelter. In this world, the narrative of the hero billionaire is a vital asset. These high-profile public donations are often nothing more than a mask, a calculated distraction from the myriad of smaller, private financial maneuvers that keep capital circulating within the donor's own network. Before we continue revealing the specific ways this money is recycled back into the pockets of the donors, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The image of the selfless giver is powerful. But as we look closer at the shift in transparency and the reality of the private foundation model, the line between charity and corruption begins to vanish entirely. The public trust is a fragile thing, and as these shadow structures grow, the very foundation of democratic society is tested by those who believe their wealth places them above the rules. The mechanics of this shadow system are as intricate as they are deceptive, often hidden behind the benign language of administrative excellence. One common method utilized by the philanthropy elite is the self-dealing trap. In this scenario, foundation funds are not directed toward vaccines or hunger relief, but are instead funneled back into the donor's immediate circle. Foundation family members are often appointed to board positions, paid well for little work. A donor's child might be paid a full-time executive salary for attending only 2 meetings a year. This transforms the foundation into a tax-exempt trust fund, ensuring that dynastic wealth remains untouched by inheritance taxes, while the family continues to live off the charitable capital. This maneuvering extends into luxury real estate. Through the real estate gambit, foundations purchase sprawling estates, villas, or what they label as educational retreats. On paper, these properties serve as research centers, allowing donors to bypass property taxes entirely. In practice, they often function as private vacation homes for the donors and their associates. Because the property is owned by a 501 entity, the upkeep, property taxes, and staff are paid for with tax-deductible dollars. The donor enjoys a seaside mansion, and the public effectively subsidizes their lifestyle through lost tax revenue. Even more opaque are the donor-advised funds, which have become the black box of modern giving. Unlike private foundations, DAFs allow donors to claim an immediate, massive tax break, while the money sits in a commercial investment account for decades. There is no legal requirement for this money to ever be distributed to a working charity. Instead, the funds are managed by financial institutions that collect fees, while the donor retains control over where the money eventually goes. This creates a stagnant pool of billions that does nothing for society, while serving as a massive tax shield for the elite. Foundations also serve as conduits for political influence. Dark money is the lifeblood of modern lobbying, and the shadow sector provides the perfect cover. And foundations frequently fund think tanks designed to favor the donor's specific business interests. By framing political lobbying as public education, CEOs can use tax-exempt funds to pressure governments for deregulation or tax breaks that further increase their corporate profits. This creates a feedback loop where charity is used to buy the very policies that exacerbate economic inequality. This cycle of self-interest is further enabled by administrative bloat. While a legitimate charity strives to keep overhead low, many elite foundations operate with a different logic. Data shows a disturbing trend where up to 80% of a foundation's annual payout is consumed by staff salaries, luxury travel, and extravagant gala events. This is where the 5% rule becomes critical. U.S. law requires foundations to spend 5% of their total assets annually to maintain their tax-exempt status. However, a loophole allows administrative costs, including first-class flights and family salaries, to count toward that figure. The result is an internal system that helps elites avoid their civic duty, The most audacious tactic, however, is the round-trip donation. A billionaire donates a sum to their foundation, claims the tax deduction, and then has the foundation invest that same money back into their own startups or private equity firms. The capital never truly leaves the donor's control, maintaining the status quo. Similar patterns exist in the arts. A donor might buy art for $1 million, appraise it at 10, and donate it to their own gallery. They claim a massive tax deduction for an asset that never moved. Finally, we see this model spreading globally. European and Asian jurisdictions are starting to mirror this American foundation model to protect dynastic wealth. From London to Hong Kong, the elite are observing the success of the shadow sector and implementing their own versions of these slush funds. This global shift creates a parallel economy where contributions are performative, while actual capital remains locked away from the tax collector. The societal price of these elaborate financial maneuvers is not just a line item on a ledger. It is a profound erosion of the social contract. When the philanthropy elite utilize foundations to shield their fortunes, the immediate consequence is a loss in tax revenue. Experts suggest billions of dollars are diverted away from the public treasury every year. This capital should have been used to repair crumbling infrastructure, fund health care, or public education. Instead, it remains locked in private accounts, serving the interests of a few while the many navigate underfunded public services. This systemic leakage ensures that while the private sector thrives in luxury, the public sphere starves. This fiscal drain is compounded by a devastating erosion of public trust. As my investigation into the shadow sector reveals these deceptive schemes, a wave of cynicism begins to wash over the general public. When people realize that a massive donation from a hero billionaire is actually a self-serving tax play, they become less likely to support legitimate nonprofits. Small charities like local food banks suffer the most. These organizations do not have legal teams or marketing budgets to create smokescreens. They rely on a public that believes in the inherent goodness of giving. By weaponizing charity for wealth preservation, the elite are effectively poisoning the well for everyone else, turning an act of mercy into a tool of financial engineering. Furthermore, we must confront the dangerous rise of philanthrocapitalism. This is a phenomenon where billionaires use foundation spending to dictate public policy, bypassing democratic processes. Whether it is global health initiatives or education standards, the philanthropy elite use tax-advantaged billions to steer the direction of society according to their personal whims and business interests. This is not democratic oversight. It is the privatization of the public agenda. It accelerates inequality by ensuring that dynastic wealth is never redistributed through traditional inheritance taxes. Foundations become immortal legal entities, allowing foundation family members to maintain control over massive pools of capital for generations, far beyond the reach of the tax collector or the voter. This creates a permanent class of untouchable capital. We also see the insidious charity washing effect. Large corporations often use foundation grants to distract the public from environmental or labor scandals. A multi-billion-dollar company might fund a small restoration project through its foundation to generate positive headlines, masking the systemic damage caused by its core business operations. These grants are not acts of altruism. They are strategic marketing expenses paid for with tax-deductible dollars. Tax authorities like the IRS and HMRC are currently struggling with financial opacity, finding it difficult to penetrate the layers of DAFs that hide these motives. The path forward requires radical legislative reform. Advocacy groups are now pushing for laws that would increase the mandatory annual payout for foundations from 5% to 10%. There are also calls for the transparency movement to force donor-advised funds into the light. Real-time reporting of distributions would ensure that money meant for charity actually reaches people in need rather than sitting in investment accounts for decades. International bodies like the OECD and G20 are beginning to discuss global standards to prevent foundations from becoming offshore tax havens. Of course, these foundation advocates argue that private capital is more efficient at solving problems than government bureaucracies. They claim the freedom to take risks is a unique strength. Lobbyists and think tanks often promote this view, arguing that the philanthropy elite are better stewards of capital than the state. However, the lack of accountability suggests that this efficiency often prioritizes the donor's legacy over the actual solution. As we conclude this investigation, it is clear that continued exposure is the only way to pressure the philanthropy elite into genuine accountability. We must move toward a system where charity is no longer a synonym for corruption. The secrets of the Slush Fund have been laid bare, and now the choice belongs to the public to demand a more equitable future where the rules apply to everyone, regardless of status.